Part of my job, believe it or not, is to try to help my clients stay out of litigation or lawsuits. It's true. I know it's a crazy thing. I'm not an attorney. I am just a real estate agent, but nobody wants to spend thousands and thousands of dollars and all of their resources and time ending up in court. So if you are a seller and you are interested in potentially getting out of a contract, now today we're talking about a contract with a buyer or with somebody who has a purchase agreement with you to purchase your home, then this is the video for you. Listen up, because I actually have experienced going to court to see just what happens if a seller tries to get out of a purchase agreement with a buyer the wrong way. Before we dive right in, I'm Shamika Fox, your Santa Cruz real estate expert. If you're looking to buy or sell in the Santa Cruz area, please feel free to reach out to me, call, text, email. I would love to connect with you. And if you are thinking about buying or selling outside of the Santa Cruz area, fill out the form that'll be pinned at the top of the comments, and I will connect you with a lovely realtor in your area to help you as well. Now, the California residential purchase agreement heavily favors the buyer. What do I mean by that? That means that there are contingencies in place, generally speaking, for a buyer. The buyer has physical contingencies, generally speaking, loan contingencies, appraisal contingencies, insurance contingencies, HOA review contingencies, seller disclosure review contingencies, etc., meaning that if any of those things do not check out, a buyer has the right to cancel so long as those contingencies are in place. That said, it is completely different for sellers. Sellers generally don't have contingencies unless they write them in. Now, a common practice or common seller contingencies would be, I'll sell you this home, buyer, contingent upon me finding and securing a replacement property. That's pretty much the most common contingency that you'll see as far as it goes with a seller selling their home. So with that said, these California residential purchase agreements that are buyer-centric have all these protective clauses that will allow a buyer to cancel escrow and get their deposit back so long as their contingency is in place. What is considered a non-refundable or non-recoupable fee for a buyer would be the fees that they spend for the cost of the appraisal, the cost of the inspections, any vendors that they pay to come to the property to inspect the property. Those are non-refundable buyer fees that will not be refunded to a buyer should they cancel escrow. Now, a residential purchase agreement is, in fact, a written, legally binding contract. So if you're a seller and you are on the fence about whether or not you want to sell, really make sure that you take this into consideration, because once you sign not only the residential purchase agreement with the buyer, but once you sign a listing agreement with a listing agent, you could be liable to pay the listing agent's compensation and potentially the buyer's agent's compensation, depending on what's negotiated with the residential purchase agreement, should you accept an offer and then you choose to cancel escrow. So this could be a very costly mistake, seller, if you are not fully committed to selling your home. So backing out without a seller contingency clause could actually open sellers up to litigation, lawsuits, etc. In fact, early on in my career, I had this experience and I was kind of caught off guard. I had to get my broker involved. Luckily, he was very available. And ultimately, what was happening was my buyers were in contract to purchase a property, and we needed to get in to do inspections. We needed to get in to do the appraisal. The sellers were going through a very messy divorce, and all of a sudden, the son decided he wanted to buy the property, and so he wanted the parents to cancel the contract that they had with my buyers. And so I went back to the buyers and I said, what would you guys like to do? You have two options. You can either cancel escrow, see if they'll refund you any money for the time that was lost, or you can hire an attorney. And they were like, absolutely not. We're hiring an attorney. We're purchasing this home. They put it on the market. We wrote an offer. They accepted the offer. This is the home we want. And so I'm going to go ahead and pursue it. So they hired an attorney and they ended up suing the sellers. The sellers were forced to execute the purchase agreement per the original contract, and by the judge, they were also forced to allow us access to the property for the inspections and the appraisal etc. It was a very awkward experience because, of course, I had to go there to let the appraiser in. I had to go there to meet the inspectors. So it was just me and some very unhappy sellers at the property. But ultimately, the buyers did end up prevailing and they were able to purchase the property because of a court ruling. So sellers, if you do not want to, or if you're having second thoughts or any doubts about selling your property, make sure that you add some sort of a contingency that has an out for you so that you don't end up in a lawsuit with the buyer who decides that they ultimately want to purchase your home. Sellers, there are some escape routes. With that said, if the buyer does not perform per the contract, there are some ways that you can get out. If the buyer does not deposit their earnest money deposit into escrow within the time frame that's been negotiated in the purchase agreement, if they do not remove their contingencies on time, what a seller could then do is give what's called a notice to perform. The notice to perform can be given to the buyer on the date of the item that is due to be executed happens. And then if the buyer does not perform within 48 hours of the notice to perform, then the seller is legally allowed to draft cancellation documents and cancel the escrow. The other way, as I mentioned, for a seller to be able to cancel a residential purchase agreement is if the seller has a contingency themselves. Now, a very common seller contingency is to have a contingency on securing a replacement property or finding a replacement property. And I usually put an extra clause in there that says securing and approving of the replacement property, because if you seller get your offer accepted on your replacement property and then you go through the inspection period and find out that there's black mold or some major red flag issue that you don't want to proceed with the purchase of that replacement property, then you can then have an out, because not only because you secured the property, but you have not approved the property. And there are time frames for that need to be negotiated with the buyer when you are negotiating the residential purchase agreement. So if you are looking to only sell your home, if you secure and approve your replacement property, make sure that your realtor understands that and make sure that your realtor writes that clause into your purchase agreement with the buyer. Another strategy to cancel escrow should you decide halfway through that you don't want to continue with the purchase agreement. And all of these are risky because the buyer has to essentially not perform, and then you would have the ability as a seller to give a notice to perform and then cancel escrow if they still don't perform. But if a buyer comes back after their inspections and they try to renegotiate and you say, no, I'm not renegotiating, and the buyer says, well, if you don't renegotiate, then I'm canceling escrow, then that is another way that you could get out of the residential purchase agreement. But if you say, no, I'm not renegotiating, and the buyer decides to proceed with the sale regardless, then again, you could be caught in a situation where if you do not perform, you don't close on time, you don't give access to the buyer for them to do their inspections or to be able to access the property in order to close escrow on time, then you again could be caught in a lawsuit. So I'm trying to help you avoid getting sued when you're in a residential purchase agreement to sell your home. Now, of course, if all else fails and you just feel absolutely adamant about not selling your home after you've entered into contract with a buyer, the best thing to do is have a very early conversation. See if you can all come to a meeting of the mind. You might need to pay the buyer some money for their lost time. You might need to reimburse them for any inspections that they had. You might need to pay your listing agent and the buyer's agent because they did indeed secure a sale for you. But if you decide midway through the transaction that selling your home is not what you want to do, have a very transparent, very sincere conversation, and remember to be generous with what you're offering in order to cancel the contract. In essence, you'd be buying yourself out of the purchase agreement so that the buyer could go buy something else, and so that your agents who have been involved with the sale thus far are compensated for their time. Should you all decide to go this route, what the document that you would use would be a cancellation of contract and release of deposit form. This would finalize the termination of the contract. It would say that the escrow is being canceled and that the buyer is going to receive 100% of their deposit back, and that the seller is off the hook from selling. This would be a mutual release form, and it prevents the seller from future legal claims and protects them because everybody is signing. It is a clear, concise way to do business. It is transparent. That you as a seller are signing cancellation instructions, and as a buyer, you are agreeing to cancel the escrow. So in conclusion, before you sign a purchase agreement, really make sure that you know what you're doing and that you 100% want to sell your home. In fact, make sure that you know what you're doing and 100% want to sell your home before you sign a listing agreement, because you could also be liable to the listing agent if you cancel a listing agreement midway through the contract. The other thing that you need to make sure that you do when you are signing a purchase agreement, if there needs to be contingencies, seller contingencies, finding and securing and approving the replacement property, any other contingencies, make sure that you clearly state that to your agent so that they can write that into the purchase agreement and that the buyer is clearly aware of those contingencies. And if you have no legal grounds, consider negotiating a fair written release so that all parties involved are happy and satisfied with the outcome. So if you are a seller, I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you don't end up in a sticky situation where you decide you want to cancel escrow at the last minute and your buyer decides that they want to purchase your home, because that can be the messiest for all parties involved. If you have found any value in this video, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you are looking to buy or sell in the Santa Cruz area, call, text, email me. I will get in touch with you. And if you are looking to buy or sell outside of the Santa Cruz area, fill out the form below and I will connect you with another amazing realtor. Thanks again for tuning in, and until next time, make it a great day.